Well, hi folks, meteorologist Michael Wilhite here, WilhiteWX.com. Wanted to bring you a latest long-range update, talk about the pattern at hand. It's the beginning of January here. It's the 6th of January, 2019, new year, first video of the year here. Starting to see some hints of a pattern change, certainly this week. The question is, can we get any of this to last, and can we get any lasting cold to come back into it? So let's dive right in, and we'll talk about a lot of things today. But first, let's talk about the pattern ahead for this weekend. We do have the hint of some snow finally for the Ohio Valley in the modeling. This is the first that we've seen hint of this for a little while. So first off, let's back up and talk about the week, and then we'll get there. So we've got a cold front that's going to move through tomorrow. All right. So here it is, and this, by the way, is a major accomplishment in and of itself. We haven't had an actual cold front move through in a little while. We've mostly had these southern systems. We've been dominated by the southern branch of the jet stream there, and so most of our systems have come from the south. And this is actually northern branch dominated sort of pattern that we're coming into, where we're going to have this cold front move, and we're going to go back to what we would call more of a northwest flow. So instead of systems coming out of the south, they'll come out of the jet stream out of the northwest. And that will give us a chance possibly for more of a wintry kind of setup possibly with us. It'll take a little bit, but you notice these blue lines, again, that's the colder air coming down with it, the change in the heights of the atmosphere. And so you start to see these angle back from the northwest over to the southeast. That's a good sign for us, a favorable sign for some cooler weather this week. As you move through this, what we'll see is the next system that will start to roll through behind this cold front is later on this weekend. So right now, the FV3 GFS, this is the new test run of the GFS, starting to break out some precipitation here in the lower Ohio Valley as early as Friday morning. And as you go through this, there's a low developing down here in Texas, and what you've got going on here is you've got just enough coupling with the northern branch of the jet stream with this that you get some precip shield here on the northern side of it. And so you end up with a quick hitting little system here as it goes through. There's another little piece of energy up here in the northern branch as well that kind of affects northern Indiana, and it sort of goes by. So again, backing that up, as it stands right now, the FV3 would suggest that we could get a little bit of snow around here with this. Now, if you take a look at the Canadians' idea of this, I just want to show you that it's not a slam dunk by any means. Here's what the Canadian shows. There it is. There's that front that moves through on Monday. And you see there's the northwest flow going on, but by the time you get into Friday and Saturday, it's a very disorganized mess down here. You're not doing anything that can be cyclogenesis, and you got some hints of some snow showers or flurries around, but you notice it's just very sporadic up here. It's nothing organized, so it's quite a bit different than what you would see on the GFS. The Euro showing a very similar idea. There's your cold front moving through on Monday, and as you go through, you start to get dominated by more of that northwest flow. Watch what this does. There's that low developing down to our south. It shows a wintry system as well. It's just not quite as far north on there, but again, a very similar solution to what you see in the GFS there. So why so many differences? Well, first off, we're 5 days out at minimum from this happening, so you're going to have significant differences usually in that time range. But really, it's the upper air pattern that makes a difference. So what we're looking at here is the vorticity, the spin in the atmosphere. And so this is the FV3. Remember, that was the one that showed us with a decent little round of snow out of this. You've got enough vorticity going on down here in Texas that you can get some cyclogenesis happen. That's a low pressure that's going to be spawned off of that. At the same time, you see that these are all connected, these little pieces of energy, and you've got some pieces of energy coming down here from the northern branch of the jet stream as well. And so that's marrying up with this. And well, the end result is you can get some good spin in the atmosphere. You got a moisture return from that low coming up, but you've got enough cool weather here and some energy in the northern branch of the jet stream where you can get a little bit of snow possibly off of this. But take a look at what the Canadian shows in that same time frame, and you see a very large difference in its upper level pattern here. You don't see nearly the amount of energy down here. So it doesn't really spawn that low, doesn't really give you the moisture being up in here. It does see a reasonable amount of energy here, a similar amount of energy in the upper level here. Not quite as much, but similar compared to what you see on the GFS. But again, it's very moisture starved because this is the northern branch of the jet stream being pumped in down here. Here's your southern branch, and so you just don't have that moisture flow coming in because you don't have the low developed there. So you get some key differences in modeling. And by the way, this is something that we are seeing even in the ensemble members as well. Let me just pull you up a frame here of the GFS ensembles. You're looking at all 20 members of the ensembles here. And what you notice, this is all for, this is 7 p.m. on Friday night. And you see several of them here. Well, this one, there's some snow there. There's a big snow here. There's some snow here. There's snow on that one. There's some snow moving in there, snow there. A little bit of snow here, some snow there, snow there. You get the idea. There's snow. There's some hints of it there. Several of these members certainly showing that you have the potential for some snows here out of this. And if you take a look at their snow accumulation, because remember, this is just a single snapshot in time, and the timing is going to be different after the storm has all moved in, and you look at the potential accumulation on this, you see several of them showing multiple things here. You show some of them with a really decent little snow hits here in the Ohio Valley, but then there's a dusting, and you know, really nothing down here in these two. There's maybe a light coating there. There's a decent storm here for Kentucky there. And again, a little dusting here, nice little snow there. You get the idea, but a lot of these, here's a really good one here. A lot of these, what you see on here, certainly have the potential for it. So all that to say, I think this is something that we need to watch this weekend. The pattern is certainly there for it. We've got support not only from the operational runs, minus the Canadian here, the GFS and the Euro are on board with this kind of an idea, but we got some ensemble support from this as well. So it's something that we're certainly going to have to keep an eye on. As far as temperatures go, we'll get that northwest flow going this week. Temperatures are going to be a little bit more conducive to it. You see we're going back into the 30s for highs over the course of this week, so that'll be much easier to get a cool down enough to be able to get some snow, and some snow that might stick. But as you notice, then we go right back up to it, and we have a milder pattern here as we round out. So if we're going to want to get some snow here, we really need to get it out of the system this week, or it's honestly probably going to be a little while before we end up with anything. Here's a visual representation of that. So we're looking at temperature anomalies here at the surface. This is the GFS ensemble. So this is a visual representation of this exact data. This is a point for Evansville, and this just sort of shows you the national map anomalies. The reds, the warmer colors, are your above normals. And we stay above normal until, watch what happens, that cold front moves through and we start to cool down, and we progressively get nice and cool as we go into the weekend. And then beyond that, well, we start to see some temperatures start to get warm, and that milder period returns for us again until late in the month, when we start to see some hints of that cooler period returning. And again, you sort of see that up and down pattern here on this. The question then becomes with that, well, all right, so outside of this weekend system, which there's not much more that I can really say other than we're going to have to monitor it. There's a potential for it, and we'll see how it goes. Outside of that, what else can we really say about this? Well, we look at the latest Euro Weeklies here, and we take a look at some of the hints on this. You can see some hints that maybe some of that cold could be returning once we get past, say, the 20th or so of January and beyond. Notice the Arctic oscillation really starting to tank into the negative here, and just tanks hard into the negative as you get into February here. It would suggest a much colder pattern. We're kind of up and down sort of right now with it, but it stays negative. Again, though, this has suggested that before, and it's not come to fruition, so we'll have to see. What about the EPO? Well, when the EPO is negative, that's usually a big ridge in Alaska, a big ridge in the west, and sort of allows the colder air to filter in. You don't have a negative EPO right now. You have a positive EPO, which means any cold that we see is going to be very transient. But notice as you head later into January, it stays negative, and it stays negative or right around neutral for a good chunk of the time. So that's a much more favorable look to it for colder weather. Sustained cold, well, then here's your North Atlantic oscillation as well. Negative NAO up around Greenland slows the jet stream down, allows it to sort of buckle, and you get these higher amplification on the ridges and troughs. And that allows things to slow down and bring some cooler weather to us. And we see that going negative later in the month here as well. So, and then the PNA, positive right now here, but you don't want this negative if you want colder patterns here. So you see kind of some mixed signals going on here in the data. But with all that said, if you take a look at what the Euro Weeklies are suggesting here as far as temperature anomalies, we look at these in 7-day chunks here. You can stay. We're going to stay fairly mild for most of January here, and then there are some hints as you get later on in January. The pattern starts to change a little bit, and as you go into February, then the cold starts to come back possibly in a bigger way. So it's something that we're just going to have to see. Certainly not a guarantee here by any means, but it certainly is possible. As far as why this is going on, well, one of the biggest culprits is the tropical forcing. If you take a look at the MJO, that's the Madden-Julian oscillation, what we're looking at here is as the convection that's going along the equator in certain parts of the Pacific and Indian Oceans. And certain phases of the MJO are very warm at certain times of the year, and you sort of get that. If I just sort of show you a plot and get an idea of that here. So phases 4 and 5 and 6 are very warm. 7 is cooling down, but it's not really hot, but it's not cold either. Phase 1, 2, 3, and 8, those are your bigger, colder phases, as you can see in here. Well, notice where we have been. Remember, 4, 5, 6, 7 are your warmer phases. Take a look at this. This is sort of where we have been. Let me show this plot. I think it's maybe a little bit easier to see here. So this is where we started out. This is the ending of November on this particular diagram. So we are in phases 8, 1, 2, and 3. All right, so remember, these phases right here, these are your colder phases. So your warmer phases are here, your colder phases then are here. Let me get a different color on this line so you can sort of see it. We started off in November here, and we were in very cold phases, even through the beginning of December here. But then all of a sudden you started to work around, and by the time you hit to the mid part of December, you went into these warmer phases, and we spent most all of the month of December. December ends there in the warmer phases. Well, it's no wonder we're so warm. You're in those very warm phases of the MJO. That's all to say that these particular phases of the MJO, the tropical forcing the convection around the equator is located in just enough of a spot that it doesn't really allow a favorable configuration for cold in the northern branch of the jet stream for us. It puts the cold elsewhere rather than for us. There's a lot more to that, but that's the simplified idea behind this. We get here into January, and we've been quite warm too. And we'll notice 6 and 7 are still warm phases. Here's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, where we are right now at the ending of this last diagram, and you're just now starting to get into the cooler phases of the MJO. And watch this, though. Would you notice, though, that right in here, and again, let me switch here. Notice these phases right in here. Notice how fast this convection has gone through compared to where we were down here. Oh, we just stayed forever in phases 4 and 5. Man, we blew through 6 and 7 really fast. And the idea here now, the forecast is that we're going into 8 into 1, so it's going to be a cooler phase. But notice that it's starting to go down here into the circle, what we call the circle of death. And anytime it goes into the circle, tropical forcing doesn't have as much effect on the jet stream, and so we don't really, it becomes more statistically insignificant as a result of that. But it's the forecast is for it to sort of die out and then maybe possibly reemerge here later in the month, but in those warmer phases again. So all that to say, we may or may not be done with the warm. We may get some cold to come back. I think we are. The MJO is in a favorable pattern for us to be able to come back on the cooler side this week. But there are hints that maybe we don't. Now, all that to say, though, is this really going to die out or not? Well, we'll just have to see. Modeling has tried to die this out before, and it didn't. In fact, if I showed you some other, excuse me, if I showed you a plot that had even earlier on to this, what you would see is that we rounded out here earlier. And what happened is here, we went from October into November, and we started out here. And then we've gone into November and into December, and, we've gotten higher into the amplitude. Well, now, are we all of a sudden going to round out down here? I don't know. What if we end up going like this and it gets an even higher amplitude? I would say that's possible. I don't know if this is going to die out or not. Modeling has suggested for a long time that this pulse was going to sort of die out before it reemerges, and it hasn't. And every time it's went around, it's gotten a little bit stronger. Are we going to continue that trend? That's certainly something that we're going to have to look. Because the reality is, if we die out, regardless, we're going to have some cooler phases this week. But what if it doesn't die out? Well, if it doesn't die out, then we're going to stay colder for longer before we get into these warmer phases around here again. So that's something that we're going to certainly have to see. Another thing that is going to, we'll have to see whether it influences or not, is the polar vortex. We have finally seen an actual split of the polar vortex. And so you've got warming up here around the pole, so a big high pressure here. And then you've got sister vortices right over here. You got a big vortices over Europe here. You got a nice big vortice over southern Canada into the United States here. So why aren't we so cold if we have the polar vortex over us? Well, if you take a look at this configuration, so this is 10 millibars. This is way high up into the atmosphere. This is into the stratosphere. We live in the troposphere. What happens in the stratosphere takes a long time sometimes to get down to where we live because it's so many miles up. Well, let's go down to the troposphere, and you see a much different jet stream configuration. And so what you see is we've got a ridge popped up here, and what you have is lower heights up here around the poles and in Alaska here. Watch what you have here. In the stratosphere, you've got higher heights up in here along with this. And so you've got high pressure going on. It's a completely different configuration. So all that to say, there are some times when the polar vortex splits, it doesn't affect us at all. Sometimes it does. Honestly, it's kind of a crapshoot. It's 50-50 sometimes. Right now, this has been split for a few days, and the modeling has seen this coming for a long time. Right now, it's not affecting us. As we go later on down into the road, it may start to affect us. I think one reason why it hasn't affected us as much has just been the simple fact here that we have been in such of these warmer phases of the MJO. But if we can get into these colder phases coming down into here, well, certainly we might be able to have a little bit more of an influence allowed from that polar vortex. Tropical forcing usually wins out rather than polar forcing, especially since tropical forcing is already down here in our atmosphere and the polar forcing is not. That's sort of the long and short of it without going into a more detailed explanation. So all that to say, I do think cold weather can come back again. I just think it's going to be a while. We got some cooler weather that's going to come this week. We've got that one system coming in this weekend that could bring us some snow with it. We're going to have to see. If we don't get any snow out of that, it's going to be a little while. And I really think we're looking at the 20th, 21st, and beyond before we can start to see a sustained cooler pattern. And even then, I don't know if it's how sustained it's going to be, because it's just going to depend. Again, if the MJO dies off like this, it's not going to be a sustained cooler pattern, and we're going to go back to the warmer phases again. If we can stay out here in these cooler phases and it not die off, we got a longer shot. Right now, it's a 50-50 chance. I do think some cooler weather is coming, but it's going to be up and down this month. Cooler this week, warmer again next week. Beyond that, we'll have to see, folks. We'll just have to see. I think some cooler weather does return there again, but I'm questioning how long it can honestly be sustained at this time. Well, I'll have more updates for you throughout the week, especially as we get closer to this potential weekend system, so check back soon. And of course, be sure to check out my Twitter feed as well for other things. You can follow me on Twitter at WillHeightWX, and I post quite frequent updates on Twitter, and you can follow me along there and get a little bit more. Take care.